full HA environment of OpenStack where you had 3 controllers, you had 3 Ceph OSD nodes, and you had 2 compute nodes. Now, as we saw in our architectural discussion, we have controllers that are running services like APIs, schedulers, conductors, database, message queue, load balancers, cluster resource managers, and all that kind of fun stuff. Compute nodes, you have very few OpenStack services running on those guys. You had hypervisor, and then you had a Nova Compute daemon to manage the hypervisor. You also had a Neutron agent to go and get your compute instances connected onto the network. And then we saw that you had Ceph deployed for your storage backend. And your storage backend, so all the storage was going to Ceph at the end of the day, where you had your block storage with Cinder residing on Ceph. You also had your glance images residing on Ceph. And finally, you also have your ephemeral volumes for Nova going on to Ceph. And so let's kind of focus in and take a look at that last little guy where we saw ephemeral storage being backed onto Ceph. This gives you some really, really cool capabilities and possibilities for things like live migration. And so I want to kind of go and take a look at what ended up happening and what you ended up seeing when you went and worked on this previous lab. So here I am right now. I'm sitting on a controller node. And I have one compute instance that's up and running, as we can see. We have VM1 up and running. We can see it has its IP address. And so let's say we wanted to go and take a look at VM1 and how it's backed on Ceph and how we can get it migrated from one compute node to another compute node. So if you were to go and want to align this VM to Ceph and where its storage device resides on Ceph, then what you can go and do is do an RBD minus P compute ls. And so what is that doing? Well, RBD minus P and followed up by compute is indicating that you are looking to go and perform some sort of operation within the pool known as compute. So this is your pool, and its name is compute, and ls is just looking to go and get a listing of your objects that reside within that compute pool. Now, what do we see here? Well, we have one device, or one RBD device in this pool, and its name is 6F85, blah, blah, blah. And we can correlate that and see, well, that's not just an arbitrary value. This aligns with the actual UUID of the VM whose disk it is. So those are identical values. If you were to go and, let's say, spin up another virtual machine, so let's just go ahead and do this with a Nova boot, do our image of test VM, can go and indicate our, already did that, go and do our flavor, can then go and indicate which network we would like this particular VM to be plugged into. net-id equals. And what I usually do, if I don't have the ID for something offhand, is I do a net show for net 04. I want to go and get the value for the column of ID, and I want my VM to be named VM2. Okay, so there we go. We see we have that second virtual machine, and when we do a Nova list, we can see VM2 now being built. And if we go back to that RBD command, then we should see that second RBD device. Sweet. See the ID lines up. And so those are both RBD objects that reside on a Ceph OSD node. Now, your OSD nodes are separate nodes. So they're different systems than the compute nodes, right? If we go back to what we saw in Fuel Master, we have 3 completely separate systems providing Ceph OSD compared to the nodes that are providing compute. Your VMs live on one compute node, and let's say you need to bring a compute node down for maintenance. Well, you don't want to go and just completely terminate all the compute instances on that compute node. You want to go and gracefully move them off of the compute node onto another compute node so that they can continue execution and so that your tenants don't experience any sort of downtime. And so let's kind of go and evaluate that, because with Ceph and the fact that your Nova ephemeral storage resides on Ceph, what this allows for is for a virtual machine's disk to remain in the same location even during the process of a VM migration. When a VM needs to migrate from one compute node to the other, typically its storage device will also need to. But in this case, since it's residing on Ceph, it does not need to. All that needs to get transferred from one compute node to the other would be RAM, as well as basically configuration, XML configuration for the particular compute instance that you're looking to migrate. So let's say we want to do this with VM1. All right, so we do a Nova show of VM1. And what do we see? Well, we can go and see that it is currently running on node 2, as we can see here, as well as here. Okay, and we have 2 compute nodes, as we know. Doing a Nova hypervisor list, we'll verify that. We have node 2 as well as node 8. So in this case, if I wanted to migrate from node 2 to node 8, that would be the scenario that would allow me to do my live migration. And now before this actually begins, let me get the IP address, 192.168.111.4. And what I'll do is I'll just begin a ping of that VM. I can see it's responding. Everything is good. And over here, let me do a watch of Nova show of VM1 so I can get up-to-date information about the particular VM that we're going to migrate. And back over here, I'll begin my migration. And so what we can do is we can do a Nova live migration. What we then indicate is the VM followed up by the compute node to migrate it to. And as we know, and as we'll verify here, it's currently on node 2. We want to move it off of node 2 onto node 8. And so let's do node 8.domain.tld. Okay, so that kicks off the process. Even though my prompt returned, it's not safe to assume that it's done migration. I'll go back to my window here where I'm doing my watch command. I can see that the state of the VM is now migrating. I can see it's now on node 8. And let's take a look at my ping command. Look at that. It's still going. I can see my sequence number. Basically, I don't see anything out of the ordinary there. And so there you go. Live migration. It's most certainly possible, especially with something like Ceph, where you don't have any of that disk storage needing to get transferred. So it's pretty cool stuff.